Auditor-General this afternoon painting a bleak picture of municipalities' finances. He's also slammed local governments for not listening to his office's recommendations. That's our lead story this lunchtime. Let's pick it up with political editor Vuyo Mvoko. Good afternoon to you, Vuyo, in the newsroom. This is what Kimi Makwetu, the AG, says. Irregular expenditure amounts in municipalities increased this financial year to 32 billion rand. That's up from 7 billion the last financial year. This is a familiar refrain. We're simply not getting this right, are we?
Indeed. Another year, terrible audit outcomes once again. The Auditor-General calls this particular report, and I quote, "Not much to go around, yet not the right hands at the till." An indictment on both the political and administrative leadership of our municipalities collectively. Yes, there are bright sparks here and there, but overall, yet another sad and terrible picture, Jeremy.
He goes on to say that municipalities are simply not listening to his office. He says that there are discrepancies and a departure from regulations governing procurement simply not being followed. Why?
Well, it's simply because in certain instances people are not qualified. In other instances people simply do not care. And in other instances they are prevented from doing the right things, either by political principles or some other outside people who clearly have control over what municipalities do or don't do in how they manage, by and large, they manage their finances. And there's a line that I'm going to quote from the Auditor-General, from what the Auditor-General had to say. I just didn't have the time to actually go and get the actual part where it says they are managing the affairs of these municipalities, and I quote, "in ways that are contrary to the prescripts and recognized accounting disciplines." And what has been done over the years, as many people would know by now, is that the Auditor-General's hand has actually been strengthened. But as he tried to explain, as questions were being asked as to whether he has actually started using the new legislation that actually empowers the Auditor-General to, for example, get financial officers to pay out of their own pockets where negligence, for example, or lack of, or them not doing their job has actually been identified. And it says these new laws, actually, the amendments to the Auditor-General Act actually kicked in only 2 months before they started working on this particular audit. So there was no time to do it extensively. But he did say that 9 municipalities were actually identified and processes have actually started. And what his deputy also added towards the end was that 57 more municipalities have now been identified where people are going to be held personally and where it's groups of people collectively responsible for the negative audit outcome. So he is beginning to use the instruments, the new instrument that is actually been given to him by the new legislation. But of course, as things stand, no results of that just yet.
There is a direct link to what he was saying and the pandemic crisis. And let me thread it for you, Vuyo, see if you agree with me. Kimi Makwetu says another common feature in all provinces is the utilization of grants from national government for infrastructure projects because of financial resources. Some of those grants end up paying operational costs such as salaries. This comes at a time when the president is pinning this country's survival hopes on infrastructure projects. If we don't get this right, it has an impact on jobs.
Indeed. And really, that was the point that he was making throughout the briefing and, of course, in the report itself. I mean, he goes on, actually, Jeremy, to detail other horrors, like the municipality having all these buildings that it turns out officials don't even know anything about, yet they maintain these buildings on behalf of municipalities. I mean, how on earth does that happen? Something is as big as a building that houses, several of its entities are actually not accounted for. In certain instances, the Auditor-General was saying they get a budget this year, and what they do is to pay for everything they consumed the previous financial year. And this happens year in and year out. And it says some of the culprits are actually serial offenders. You have people who have been in the same jobs for about 7 years, doing the same things, and those municipalities getting the same negative outcomes, yet those people are still in their jobs.
Vuyo Mvoko is our political editor. Thank you. We are chasing the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, for its response to this. Now